everyone. Just want to do a quick demo of trying the Ralph Wiggum plugin. So for those who haven't heard about it, it's very popular at the moment. It's a plugin for Claude Code officially. So you can find it by being in Claude Code and doing /plugins and searching for Ralph Wiggum. So the character from The Simpsons. And my basic understanding of what it does is that it takes like Claude documentation, so like a PRD or a task list, and it transforms that list into kind of the smallest testable components. And then when you run the Ralph Wiggum command, it'll go to that list, pick up ideally the kind of top of the list that hasn't been completed, and then it runs kind of a prompting loop. So it'll give itself a prompt on completing that task, work to complete that task as usual, just like if you had asked Claude to complete that task, and then it has acceptance criteria for what it means for that task to be successfully completed, and it will check that when Claude says it's finished the task. And then I think it has it'll create for itself some hard criteria that must be true to mark the task done. And if those criteria aren't met, it gives itself a prompt again to restart that development loop. So it kind of prompts Claude again. So Claude prompting Claude. It says, hey, the criteria weren't met. Do this, develop this feature again, complete this task again. And it will continue to do that until the hard criteria are met. So super useful, especially for large chunks of development that you kind of want to, not exactly one shot, but you want to let Claude develop in an unsupervised way. So the ideal use case everybody kind of references is you create this PRD, you create this task list using Claude to create both those documents, and then you tell Ralph, you run the Ralph command, and then you go to bed and you wake up and it's done. So I tried that yesterday. I set up Ralph. I gave it a new project, a new PRD, and I said okay, I'm gonna run the Ralph command and I'm going to bed. And I did that, and now I'm back today to see how it went. So let me just show you how I got that set up. This is for a new project idea. I don't know how far I'm going to go down the road with this one, but I'm calling it Claude OS, so Claude operating system. And basically, it's coming out of my vision for responsive UI on your computer. So I think the future of computer use, our operating system, so Windows, iOS, will be fully powered by agents or by, some kind of Claude Code backend, where the user is basically talking to their computer the whole time rather than clicking UI or installing software. And they're just here's this thing I need. I need to look at my calendar. I need to look at flights. I need to schedule a flight on these dates. Here's my budget. And then the UI will dynamically generate, the coding agent operating system will dynamically generate UIs and screens and run workflows, querying the internet for data, pulling that in, displaying it to the user, and the user will navigate solving this problem through these generated UIs. And as they're doing it, they'll be able to really ask for specific features and views. So I don't really understand how you're displaying these flights. Can you give me a different view? Can you show me 4 columns with different airlines? Or I'd rather see it as cards, so every user can have a really responsive and ergonomic UI experience as they're solving their use cases. So with that being said, I guess the other feature I'm interested in is using the local hard drive as a repository for all the things about me. So right now, there's tons of information about me on the cloud, and it's kind of stored in a lot of different places. I have lots of different apps. I have lots of different, services I subscribe to, and my data's across all of them. But I was thinking, to really have some kind of like life context to then solve complex problems, I could pull all that data down locally and manage it here. It's not ideal, but it's a starting point. And then my Claude operating system would have access to all that data about me. So it would have, bank statements, it would have my calendar, it would have, all of the kind of project working documentation that I currently store in the cloud. It would have, I don't know what else, other pieces of data about me. This, emerging use case. And so it would be able to use that creatively to solve my tasks too. So recently I built like a local budget data analysis app, and I just run it locally with CSV files I pull down for my banks and credit cards. And I can get really specific views of how I'm spending money. I'm like, well, show me a view where it tracks all the money I spend on my dog. And it just creates that in a few seconds, and now I can see this really interesting breakdown of dog spending. So I get these it's very responsive. So anyway, I had this discussion with Claude about what I want, and then developed a PRD as usual. We did a lot of refining, and then I said, okay, I'm also going to use the Ralph Wiggum plugin to develop it. So make sure that this is all ready for it. We created a repo, pushed that PRD there. Then I went to Claude Code and had another conversation about my vision documents and refined them and updated it. And then I'm like, all right, now what I want to do is use Ralph. Walk me through that. So it started walking me through how to install the Ralph plugin, and I'll show you now what that looks like. So here's VS Code. And we can take a look at terminal for a second here. And basically what I did to get Ralph installed, so you start Claude, and then you go to plugin, and then you search for Ralph. But I think because I've already installed it, it's not showing up. So you can see here I've installed it. So if you go to plugins and search, you should be able to just type in Ralph. It'll come up. You click it or hit enter. It installs. And then you'll see that it's enabled. And it's a Claude official plugin, which is really cool. Because I think it was just created by a user. I should know his name. If you Google it, it comes up. So you install it, and then whenever you install these new plugins or commands, you have to quit your Claude and then restart your Claude to get it to work. So I did that, and then there was some awkwardness in running the command. As I was asking Claude, hey, how do I use Ralph? It kept telling me this /Ralph loop, and then the instruction text, but I found that didn't work. Really, the command is /Ralph:\Ralph loop, and then you put the instruction text. So that was a little awkward moment of trying to figure that out. But once I did that, we gave it a command to start developing the tool, and basically it's telling it to read this prompt.md, which I had Claude create, and that's where it's broken down the PRD into kind of a Ralph ready list of tasks and acceptance criteria. So I gave it these instructions, and then asked it to go through and code that first feature. So let's go back up here to where I gave it that command, just so you can see it. Okay. Really far up here. That's where I was figuring out the Ralph command. Okay, so here it is. So it's the /Ralph loop. And I said build Claude OS phase 1, read prompt MD for instructions. And so if we look at prompt MD, here it is. And so that's giving it these instructions to read Claude MD, the roadmap, this prompts phase XX. So these are all the pieces of context it should load for itself. And then some working agreements for how it should work. And, this list, a breakdown of the project into these different prompts. So basically these kind of different sprints, so to speak. So I hit that. It looks like it ran, and then I went to bed. And it looks like it ran all night. Not all night. It ran during the night and completed the first task. And I'm running this in Claude Dangerously Skip Permissions mode. I'm just trusting it. I haven't been burned by it yet. And this is my personal computer, and I feel like the risk is acceptable. So, it's running, and it finished its build. It gave me this nice readout of what it built. And then what I've done is I've asked it to explain to me in detail what it's built, because, I vaguely have some understanding of what it's done here. It's kind of setting up the project. It's installing some of the things we need. It's building out the directory as we kind of want it to be structured. So it's kind of a setup task. But because, my technical knowledge is still pretty limited, one of the things I really like to do when I get these big outputs is ask the agent to explain in detail, what did you do? And I'm going to take this now. This is its explanation of what it did. And I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to go back to Claude, and I'm going to say, okay, based on our directory and instructions, how well did the Ralph-driven dev loop do? This is the output from the first ask I had of Claude using Ralph to dev this project. And then I'm going to paste in that context, and I'm going to have Claude Code app evaluate. Oh, I've got to log back in. Evaluate how well Ralph did. So I'm finding more and more really being intentional about pausing after outputs from coding agents, asking for a detailed explanation, and then bringing that back to kind of like my architecture partner. So I try to keep like one window in context open around the design and vision of an app, and then I have one open that's for the dev of the app. And whenever something's done in dev, I bring it back to vision and have the vision context evaluate, did they approach this the right way? Is it aligned with what we've been talking about? Check our docs, check the code, make sure we're on track here. And if we're not, let's figure out what went wrong and how we can steer dev better. And so that's been a pretty productive loop for making sure that the limitations of my ability to evaluate the outputs beyond kind of running an app and making sure it works from a user perspective are supplemented by having like a vision agent assisting my evaluation of the dev progress. So that's what I'm working on this morning. We'll see how well Ralph did, and then probably do some tweaking and have it run all day and build this Claude OS prototype. Okay, I just had to log back in. So now it's evaluating Ralph's report, or Ralph, Man, am I going to start calling Claude Ralph? Claude's report on what it did with that first Ralph loop. So hopefully this will help me steer the dev of the project better. Looks like Ralph nailed it. Okay, Claude's calling Claude Ralph. And it set up the directory project. The project directory, did some installations, cool. We could test it here, so I guess we could do that really quick. Okay, check it out. We got a new application window that ran just now. Let's get that viewable. Why can't you see that? Ah, okay, cool. Oh no, that's weird. It's not rendering in OBS. I'll have to share a screenshot. Weird. But it's running. So it made kind of the baseline, operational window for Claude OS. So that's good. Looks like the Ralph loop succeeded in the first step here. So let's continue. Okay, so committed and pushed phase 1 to GitHub. So we've got that captured well. Now we're going to, feed a prompt back into Claude using the Ralph loop. It's going to go to prompt.md, see what we need to update next. So phase 1, phase 1 is not updated. So we need to update that first, honestly. Make sure all of our docs reflect the completion of the work just finished. So trying to maintain some doc-driven dev here, have Claude update documentation so that these docs serve as its memory of where we're at in the project. So we'll see how that goes. It's updating Claude.md, great. Let's see what it did. What did it do? Line 22. Oh, it just read those. Okay, it just read those. Current state. So it shifted current state. Where is that? Here we go. Okay, so it just shifted what phase we're at. It said phase 1 complete. We're in phase 2. Great. So now that context and memory for Claude is updated. It updated the README and the roadmap. That's great. Okay. So now we'll give it this Ralph command and check it to make sure. Okay, we got an error here. So I'm going to go back to Claude and say, hey, what gives? Got this error when trying the command you wrote. And I have Claude write these commands for me because it's annoying to try to format it in the terminal window. Okay. So let's try this newly formatted command. Okay, that looks like it's running. Great. So it's reading prompt.md, which current phase, check roadmap. Okay. Great. So it's going to go now check the roadmap, doc, and we're on phase 2. So looks like there's some overlap from phase 1 that phase 2 has completed. Great. So it's just going to work through those tasks, and it's going to keep feeding itself the loop until the hard acceptance criteria were met. Okay, so I had completed this next phase pretty quickly, so now I'm asking it to explain how it did this work and whether or not it was using the Ralph loop, because it's pretty hard for me to tell just by looking at these, terminal outputs, whether or not it was used. And because it was already such a small phase, it may not have used it anyway, but I at least want to start understanding what that Ralph loop looks like in terminal, so I can kind of see it as it's happening. So the Ralph loop was activated, only one iteration. Most of the work was already done. Okay, but at least I'm getting some sense of, the system being able to communicate with me about whether it's using the Ralph loop or not. So now I'm going to take this output, bring it back to my kind of management context, and say, okay, Claude completed phase 2. How does it look? And let's, yeah, okay. Where are we at here? Phase 2 looks good. One iteration. Okay. All right, we're ready for phase 3. Okay. Okay, give me phase 3 Ralph command, please. And while it's doing that, what I want to do is make sure our documentation is up to date. Commit and make sure our docs are up to date. Honestly, that's the wrong order. Make docs up to date, commit, and push. So we'll see how this goes. It's updating roadmap. Great. Oh, shoot. We don't want two Claudes updating at the same time. Overzealous. Sorry, I was back here. It was going to. Files have been unexpectedly modified. It just errored out of that because my other Claude is updating those files, I think. So anyway, here's the next command. I think it's the same command every time. You're basically just telling it to read this prompt doc. The prompt doc tells it to go read the roadmap, and then the roadmap's up to date saying go do prompt 3, and then it goes reading the documentation for prompt 3. So it's kind of a funny chain of go read these things that tell you to read things. So let's see. All right, done, pushed. Okay, so we're going to give it the Ralph command to start phase 3, and we'll check back in when it's done. Okay, we're in a pretty good flow here. The Claude OS system is moving along kind of faster than I expected, but maybe the app I'm building, or at least the prototype, isn't that complicated. But I'm still going through this practice of, hey, you just completed one of the phases, so explain to me in detail what you've done. I take this output, grab it all, and then I bring it over to my Claude conversation, dump it in, and have it analyze it, and just kind of check to make sure that the dev is running through those Ralph loops as intended and is staying aligned with our documentation. So that's working pretty well. And so now I'm kind of managing 2 builds at the same time. I'm also working on my slide deck generator build, and that one I'm not using the Ralph loop because it's a pretty small build. It's kind of just a Claude code driven directory. But I'm still at the end of each dev stage of setting up that system, similarly asking Claude to explain in detail what it just did. I bring it over to a Claude app context for the project, and I say, look, Claude just completed this next step. Please evaluate how it's doing. And so far, everything's aligned. But if anything came up, that would be a powerful mechanism to say, okay, I'm going to take that, that flag, ask Claude app for instructions, take those instructions back to Claude dev, and say, hey, here's some direction on improving the output you just provided. Okay, we're back. I let this system run throughout the day, and it built the 13 phases that I asked it to build. I will say that after each phase, I had it, commit and push and prompted it to build the next phase. So it wasn't fully building the whole app out without me. And I'm not, I didn't know what to expect one way or the other. I kind of wanted it to just build it out completely without me rather than having to, tell it to do each phase. But, it just wasn't set up to do it that way. So that's something I'm going to look at for the next iteration of using this tool. And so it made kind of what I was asking for. It made something deployable, but it missed some key requirements. And so I think maybe some of that could have been avoided with better documentation. This is my first time trying to translate PRD docs into Ralph Ready docs. But basically, let's just pause what it's doing there. So it made for me, and let's see if I can even show you this. Because before I couldn't. So, okay, cool. So, yeah, so it made this nice UI for me for Claude OS. And, it's kind of what I'm asking for. It's got the chat window here. It's got this learning window, which I'll refine. But basically, I want to, show how Claude is building a local app for you. It's making files and folders, editing them, just so somebody can begin to learn, oh, okay, when an app is getting created, it's just making files and folders on my computer. And then the tools will render here, so you can have probably a list of tools you've built that are just local apps. They're connected to your local hard drive. Claude can iterate on them with you. If you're like, hey, move that button here or there, great. And they can do the useful thing on your computer. So that's all good. But I noticed when I started interacting with it, hey, I need a task tracking tool. At first, it was giving me pretty generic responses, just like a Claude session would. And so I'm like, oh, that's weird. And so I went back to VS Code and to Claude, and I'm like, what's going on? And we did some quick diagnostics, looking at the backend logs of the tool, feeding that in. I usually make a dev log file, and I just paste in the logs here, and then I grab the path and give it to Claude. And I'm like, hey, look at these logs. What's going on? And Claude realized, when we pull Claude code into that context of the app, it's just coming in naive. There's nothing directing that Claude. And I'm like, oh, that's a big miss. Why did we miss that? We need Claude in this app context to understand the app and to have basically, a context and prompting that we've provided it. So like an app-specific Claude.md, app-specific skills, and maybe some agent instructions. So now I'm doing that iteration, and I'm kind of in the middle of it. So that's kind of the next step. Overall, then, the Ralph system got me pretty far with like basically the structure I wanted, but it missed a pretty important feature. So I think if I was going to do this specific project again, I would really spend a little bit more time getting dialed in with the Ralph specific documentation pieces so that something like this wasn't missed. I'm kind of excited to finish this project though. I mean, at least like a quick MVP of it. So maybe I'll have another update. Okay, so I had to do a little bit of debugging, maybe like 30 minutes. So overall, Ralph gave me a decent starting point, but again, getting those Ralph aligned PRD documents. So really it's like translating the PRD into the Ralph input documents, which I think is like a JSON file, which is just like structured text, like tagged text, rather than just a markdown file. So anyway, what you see here is kind of the intent of this Claude operating system. I was able to ask it to make me a task tracking tool for me to use on my computer. And then it made one here in this kind of tool library. And I can open it up and I can add a task. And I'm like, okay, like that's pretty decent. And now I wonder if I can edit it. Like, okay, we just made that task tracking tool. I'd like to improve it. Can we create projects within the tool under which tasks sit? So let's see if we can iterate, because that's like part of the fun of this. You know, I'd love for people to really see how quickly they can make a UI that's functional. You know, the back end is local on their computer, and then iterate on it until it's really ready to work for them. So let's see how it works here. I also, you know, I want to make this learning window a little more useful. Right now it's just like a glorified Claude terminal view. So it could use some other flags in the UI to help people understand what's happening. But I think that could be a really fun component of this as well. Like, let's move vibe coders who are totally not learning how software is structured to a space where they can at least have some kind of mental model about what's happening. Because that, I think, will give them some more control over feedback loops. If they're like, oh, like, how do I go get logs? Or how do I give Claude context about what it's building? Well, I can go get logs and screenshots and I can put it in the directory where I'm working, and then Claude can go find those. So just as an example, I also think this chat window, this chat could become better. Right now, it's kind of just give an input, it's going to tell you what to do. Although I haven't tried like doing some extensive planning here, but that would be interesting to see what happens as well. So I wonder if it's like trying to edit. Let's see. Did you edit the existing one or just make a new one? Curious. Let's see what it says. And I can't navigate away yet because the chats don't persist. I gotta fix that. So while we're waiting for an answer there, let's fix that. Hey, I noticed that the chats still don't persist. Can you look into that? So let's see if we can fix that. But back in Claude OS, edited, cool, that's good. So let's go look at it. New project, P1, doing things. Oh, give it a color, that's fun. Okay, there's project 1, project 2, nice, nice, nice. So let's test that functionality. Cool, that's persisting. To those, yeah, nice. Okay, so like, here's your local task tracker. Oh, that is persisting, nice, okay. Actually, it is persisting. Okay, so where is the data from my tasks that I put into the UI stored? So I just want to make sure like it's fully functioning. So when I'm putting data into this, it's persisting from session to session. Like if I close down this app, would these task cards show up again the next time I start? So this was a cool project. Did it in a few hours today. It was a fun way to try out Ralph. Definitely learned a couple things. I think that key moment of setting up the PRD, translating it into Ralph ready docs. So I think I'll do that next time. I'll get the PRD, probably using Claude Desktop app, and then I will give Claude Desktop app more direction in reading through the Ralph documentation that you can find on GitHub and say, look, we really need to make sure that we're translating at a granular level all the PRD features into something that Ralph can execute on. I tried to do that this time, but I did it pretty quickly, so I think there's probably a loop of checking it that's necessary. So anyway, maybe I'll build this out a little bit more, but it was a fun experiment. Okay, I did a little more iterating. I just think this is like a fun idea, and now it's like it's making some cool apps. So I'm chatting here. I added chat persistence, so that's nice. I made a couple tools. I made a tool that shows me a visualization of my hard drive and how I'm using storage on it, because I was just curious about that. We've got the task tracker, and then I'm like, well, I'm making videos, like, and I'm paying for like a video editing tool. I'm like, can you just make me a simple video editor? And so it works pretty well. Can upload a video. I can play in here.
Hey, Joe.
And then it's starting to have like the right video editing functionality, but it doesn't quite work. So, there's still a lot of limitations to the tool, but I think like the principle of like, hey, you need like a little bit of a UI software solution to do something locally on your computer. You could just have Claude OS spin these things up, and it's building them pretty quickly. And I think for a lot of functionality, these are all solved problems. So like Claude could fix them pretty easily. And then, you're just like asking your computer like, hey, I really wish I could see this, or I really wish I could do that. And it would like responsively generate the UI and capabilities that you need. So something pretty cool. I wonder how far this will go. Claude released like a very similar, if not the same, test or like prototype maybe like 5 or 6 months ago. And I don't know what happened to that, but I bet that's coming. So it's like a fun space to explore.